So if you find this sleep story helpful or interesting, then give it a thumbs up, leave any comments that you've got below, and if you aren't already, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you can receive notifications of when future sleep stories go live. I have dozens and dozens of stories already on my channel that you can go and search. I also release new stories every single week, so I hope you enjoy this story. So take a moment to get yourself comfortable, allow your eyes to close. And with your eyes closed, you can begin to relax. And as you relax, I don't know whether you will fall asleep faster with the sound of my words, or with the spaces between my words, or whether it'll be with each out-breath that you take. And as you begin to drift comfortably asleep, so I'm just going to tell this story in the background. And the story is about a man driving along a road through some forest. And there are tall trees either side, stretching off into the distance of dense forest. And he's just driving along this incredibly straight road, cutting through this forest. And he's been driving for some time along this road, with those tall trees just passing him by on either side, with just the sounds of the car as it sticks to one speed, driving along. The windows wound down, sounds of birds, the sound of air passing the sides of the car. Seeing just the area of sky above and in front of him, noticing its blueness. As he drives along, hearing the sound the car makes on the road, on such a smooth and straight road. And after a while, eventually, the man reaches a fork in the road. And he pulls up at that fork in the road and begins to think about which route he should take. He isn't going anywhere specific. He's just exploring and finding somewhere to camp out in these forests. And so he's just following his heart, following his gut feelings. And he decides to turn left. And he follows that road left. And continues along that incredibly straight road. Until eventually he finds a turning off into the forest. And it's a turning onto a muddy track. And so he takes that turning, drives down that muddy track, the car bouncing along the track, thinking to himself how lucky he is that he's got good suspension as that car drives down that track. And while the car drives down the track deeper and deeper into the forest, so he notices that the light dims around him and the sounds of the birds increases. And his car works its way down that track, with the wheels occasionally slipping on the mud, but generally doing okay at working down that track deeper and deeper into the forest. and the man doesn't know his exact location. He's not interested at this moment in knowing his exact location. He's more interested in finding somewhere secluded that he can camp for the night and have a bit of solitude, a bit of time away from the hustle and bustle of the nearby city. And so he continues along that track until eventually he can notice that ahead is getting lighter. More sunlight is obviously shining in. And as he gets closer to that lightness, he notices that it's opening out into a clearing around a lake. And so he drives his car out into that clearing, pulls the car off the track, around by the tree line. He gets out his car, goes round to the boot, opens the boot, takes out a tent, and he finds a location a little bit back from the lake, a little bit higher up, and pitches the tent there. And once he's pitched the tent, so he digs a pit in front of the tent, just a shallow pit to build a fire in. He uses some rocks, then some wood, and then some small bits of finely cut wood that he lights to start that fire. And with a crackling and a popping, that fire starts and catches the larger bits of wood alight, helping to keep that fire going. He then sits back from the fire, just inside the tent, and he relaxes back onto his elbows, lying back onto his elbows, just taking a moment, and he listens to the crackling fire. And he gazes up at the sky, and he breathes calmly and peacefully, and takes a moment of relaxation for himself. And after a moment's relaxation, he continues getting himself sorted, getting his campsite set up how he wants it. He's aware that the sun is going to be beginning to set soon. So he goes and gets the last of his gear from his car, puts it into his tent, makes his tent cozy and comfortable, and a relaxing space to camp. He hangs a torch up inside the tent, ready for when it starts to get dark. He goes and finds a thick branch and pulls it over near the campfire for something to sit on. He's happy to sit in the tent, but he's aware that he might like to sit outside the tent, sitting by the fire. And he sets up a structure around the fire that he can cook some food on, that he can rest a pot on top of to cook some food over the fire. And as the sun sets, so he notices the way the light glistens and sparkles on the lake, and notices the way the lake is beginning to take on an inky look as the sky turns darker, initially with some oranges and reds as that sun sets. And he cooks himself some food, sitting by that fire. And he eats that food, and he notices as the sun sets that the temperature drops a little as well. So he wraps up warm by the fire, eating that food he's just cooked, hearing the sound of crickets and other nighttime sounds, the sounds of bats flying around overhead. He notices how the birds quieten down, with just the occasional bird from time to time making a noise, and how it's almost like his sense of hearing increases in sensitivity, that he can hear the rustling of the leaves of the trees, the gentle sloshing of the water of the lake on the shore, the occasional sounds of little animals scurrying around, perhaps going down to the water's edge for a drink, the occasional splash from out in the water where maybe a fish has popped up above the surface for a moment. And he notices as the sun fully sets over the horizon, the stars in the sky twinkling, sparkling overhead, the Milky Way stretching beautifully across the sky. And he relaxes back into his tent, relaxing down in his tent, not to fall asleep just yet, but just to be comfortable and cozy while enjoying the peace and the experience. And after a while of enjoying the peace and the experience, the fire begins to burn down to embers. He can still feel some of that warmth coming off the fire. And he turns on the torch, closes the tent, and he can hear the movement of the walls of the tent in the breeze, and yet feels so calm and relaxed inside the tent, just relaxing inside the tent and drifting and floating comfortably asleep. And the next day he wakes up feeling so refreshed, peaceful and calm. He unzips the tent. He can still see a little bit of smoke rising from the fire. He takes some deep breaths of the fresh air, walks down to the lake, splashes some of the water on his face, feeling the coolness of that water, and decides to go and explore today. And with curiosity, he wanders around the lake, and he follows that lake all the way round to a large tree, and this large tree is near the lake and set away from the rest of the forest. And the tree doesn't look like the other trees. It's taller and it looks like it's been here a lot longer. And he reaches out and touches the bark of the tree, runs his fingers around that bark. And then he notices that he can climb up a little way, so he climbs up the tree to the first branches, and he sees that the centre of the tree appears to be hollow, and unusually for a tree there seems to be a ladder heading down the inside of the tree. And so he shimmies over to the centre of the tree, shimmies over to the trunk, and squeezes himself inside that trunk and descends the ladder. And once he's descended lower than the tree, suddenly everything opens up really wide as he enters a cavern deep under this tree. And he continues to descend down to the cavern floor. And once at the cavern floor, he gets his phone out and shines the torch around this cavern. And he can see that there's water flowing in from the lake through an underground passageway, creating a waterfall down here in the cavern, and a river that waterfall's flowing into, and he follows that river deeper and deeper underground in this cavern. And in the distance he can hear the sound of drumming, and he continues to follow the river, going deeper and deeper. And the further he gets away from the waterfall, the calmer that river becomes. And the calmer the river becomes, the more he notices it widens, until eventually he arrives at a cavern where the water is like a lake in the middle of this part of the cavern. And around the other side of the lake, he can see somebody playing a drum. And he walks around the lake towards the person, and they don't seem fazed by him being there. They just continue to play. And this person appears to be part man, part bull, where the lower half of their body is like the front part of a bull, as if they've got the legs of a bull and the torso and the head of a human. And they just sat there playing a drum, and he walks up to them with curiosity. And he asks them who they are, where this place is, why they're here. And they say who they are, and that this is where they live. That they travel out at night because their eyes struggle with the bright daylight. And that the way in that the man took is really more of an emergency exit, or just some way of keeping the air circulating. There's actually an alternative route into this cavern. And they live down here in this cavern. They occupy themselves playing their drum. And they seemed incredibly friendly, and the two of them spoke for a while. And this person said that there's a healing meditation that he can teach them. There's some knowledge they can take back with them. Something that will help them to expand their awareness. Help them to get the most from everyday life. Help them to get the most from their experiences. And the man was interested in this. And so he followed the instructions to sit cross-legged on the floor, close his eyes, take a deep breath, and let all that air out, and take another deep breath, and let all that air out. And then begin to channel some healing, almost like a healing light down through the body, and to breathe in that healing light, and breathe out, and then breathe in healing light, and breathe out. And they continued to do that breathing, and were guided to be aware of your shoulders relaxing with each out-breath, and be aware of the arms relaxing, and of the neck relaxing, and the face, and the head, and aware of the chest relaxing, with each out-breath aware of the back relaxing and the legs relaxing, of that relaxation spreading, passing down through the body. And as the body relaxes, so the mind begins to relax also, and being aware of how that mind begins to calm and relax. And they continue to breathe calmly and relax and follow the instructions. And as they continued to do that, they were then guided to begin to expand their awareness from within them first of all, paying attention to their inner experience, and then allowing that awareness to spread outside of themselves, to being fully aware and alert of the sensations of them guiding the man through the experience. And then being aware of their environment, of where the walls were in the cavern, of the water, of the movement of the water, of the temperature of the water, all without actually touching it. And then expanding that awareness down through the cavern, out to the tree and the forest and the ground, and just expanding that awareness further and further, and then holding on to that expanded awareness, drifting back from the experience while remaining attached to that expanded awareness, having a calmness, a calm, hyper-aware state. And they were told that while you're in this state, continue to explore down here. And they remained in this hyper-aware, relaxed state. And they continued to explore. They were going to explore and find their way out, the proper route in. And they explored further down the cavern, where they found a corridor. They followed that corridor until they found some wooden doors. And they opened the wooden doors and found themselves up high in a cliff, overlooking forest, looking over treetops for miles to see in all directions. And they followed a path around the side of the cliff, up on top of the cliff, and they looked back and could see even higher now, over treetops. They could see bird of prey flying in the sky, and being in this relaxed, alert, hyper-aware state, they almost felt like they could feel what it's like to be that bird flying. They almost felt like they had a connection with their environment. And they followed the path, and they walked away from the top of that cliff, having a sense of the right direction to walk, to cut through this forest back to their campsite. And they cut through the forest, being hyper-aware of sounds around them, in a relaxed awareness state. Almost like they weren't necessarily attaching to anything they were aware of. They were just being in the moment. They weren't actually doing anything. And they found their way back through the forest until they found the clearing, found the lake. And at the lake they found their way back to their campsite. They had something to eat, rested at their tent, and they started to contemplate and consider the experience they'd had and the meaning of that experience and the surreal nature of the experience. And they were curious about the fellow they met on their journey. And then, as the sun began to set, they decided to settle down for the night. And they drifted and floated comfortably, asleep aware that in the morning they were going to take all their learning with them and journey back to their everyday life, carrying on with their usual routines, bringing back this sense of calmness, of peace, of tranquility, this sense of being in the moment, of connection to the world around them, and a sense of finding peace and purpose. And they held on to all that as they drifted and relaxed asleep. And while they drifted and relaxed asleep, so they began to dream and integrate their learning from their experience camping out here in the forest, their learning of meeting that fellow in the cavern, their learning from the meditation experience. And they knew they would be able to take all that back with them, that they can use instinctively and automatically in their everyday life. And they drifted and floated into a deep, comfortable, restorative sleep.